Welcome to the Great Conversation in Security webinar series hosted by Security System News. My name is Ron Warman. I'll be the facilitator and moderator for today's fireside chat. This discussion is essentially teeing up a broader discussion we will have at the Great Conversation in Security on March 5th and 6th in Seattle, Washington. The ecosystem will be represented there, including security executives, risk resilience and security executives, technology vendors and subject matter experts, and of course, consultants and integrators. Today's discussion, if we move forward here.
On your screen and then hit the keys.
There we go. Today's discussion will be about building the business intelligence hub on the road to 360. Interesting words, business intelligence hub and 360. We're going to be discussing what those terms might mean to you as a security executive in the industry and where it might be going in creating a path to value for your organization. Today's speakers are Dion Chatterton from Cisco and Alan Mullinex from Lenel. Gentlemen, can you introduce yourself?
Great, thank you, Ron. This is Dion Chatterton. So I'm the Senior Manager at Cisco Systems in our Safety, Security, and Business Resiliency Department. My team, STS, really manages all of the technology that we deploy, cameras, access control, intrusion alarm, including all the technologies for our security operations centers as well. So our group really is kind of the geeks of our security world.
Alan?
Thanks, Ron. My name is Alan Mullinex, and I'm the Director of Sales for Integrated Solutions here at Lenel. And my role and responsibility is to grow our large customer base's integrated solutions base. And what that means for us has changed over the years. But currently, we have a number of customers that require this bigger view, bigger 360 view. So my job is to help them achieve those integrations and work with some of our partners to do so.
What I love about both of these speakers, Dion and I were chatting earlier, is Dion really is aligned with the business as far as technology infrastructure is concerned, so the business of Cisco, as well as aligned with the key performance indicators, otherwise known as the KPIs of the security program. And Alan, as a key hub and spoke vendor, is part of this, because what Dion is going to cast for us is what's going on now as far as the dynamic of the industry. And Alan, as a technology vendor, must listen in and respond. So like any other great conversation model, Alan, why don't we start with you and how the traditional model is playing out today as far as a hub and spoke?
Sure, thanks, Ron. So a little bit of history and perspective from my view. My first access control system I was part of was in the 80s, and I was responsible at that time for printing barcodes on a dot matrix printer and then laminating the access card, if you will. And that was my entry into the business. And we've obviously come a long way since then. Currently, I think some of our customers that are of a larger scale, medium to large scale, they don't necessarily want to have a 360 view, they require it. And it's a requirement for their normal business flow. And so, you know, we all know that integration kind of started with some intrusion and video earlier in our time. And then we moved to some kind of crude integrations where people were maybe custom writing a few things. And then the industry began to catch up and standardize on some integration practices. And we had some true SQL integration. And today, I think we're in that same frame where we're still writing in and out of SQL, but many of our partners have finally caught up, and we've gotten to this level of seeing it as a business requirement. And so today, if I look at what we're doing, I know our customers require more efficiency and more rapid access to their data. There are some restraints today with getting this done, primarily in the siloing of departments within a business and the kind of lack of enforcement of some policy and procedure. So I think that's an important topic, but I think we're making progress, and this type of conversation is not just good for us as individuals, it's very good for our industry.
Well, the first thing that strikes me, and I really appreciate you putting it in context of history, Alan, but the first thing that strikes me in this model is there's a lot of responsibility on the ecosystem. The end user, as you said, is functionally siloed, so that could present a challenge. And of course, the various vendors have to take responsibility most of the time for their integrations. So those are definitely challenges in this, in fulfilling what you call the want and need. Is that correct?
Correct.
Fantastic. Let's go to the 360. What do we mean by a 360? Why is it important on the road to security being aligned with the business? And Dion, step us through from your vantage point.
Thanks. So the concept of 360 by itself or in itself implies that we're kind of looking all around us. We're not necessarily narrowly focused on a particular thing. We're taking off the blinders and saying, what else is there? And what else perhaps should we as a physical security department or group be doing? Are we just simply narrowly focused on keeping the bad guys out of the buildings? Or are there other things that we should be doing, at least considering, that potentially could add value back to the business? Often what happens for security in businesses is security is seen as simply as a cost center. All right, I gotta spend X amount of money to be able to put in badge readers and cameras and other devices that the security department says we need in order to protect our buildings and assets. But is that all? And if we're only seen as that, it's always difficult for us to be able to get any funding to be able to move forward. But perhaps if we take this 360-degree model, we can apply it to the fact that there are opportunities out there for us to add value well beyond simply keeping the bad guys out. And that those value propositions may be easier to quantify and put dollar numbers around than what we're able to do right now with physical security and security systems at large. That's always difficult for us to be able to say, well, there is X amount of value to that, and that's why you should invest more in the physical security department. But if we can come back to the business and say, hey, there are some other things that we can help provide back to the business that we think there's value around, often we can be able to show an ROI on those value adds and get funding to be able to do them. And so that's kind of what this slide really represents, is in addition to the costs that we normally have, are there things that we can give back to the business based on the values, based on the skills, based on the things that we do and have knowledge of as physical security practitioners and as a department. And so this slide just shows a few of the things that we at Cisco have been able to do over the last several years that we think really adds value back to the organization, and some of the things that allows us to be able to provide that value. Early on in my career at Cisco, I had a vice president that one time came up to me and asked me the question, why do you put brakes on a race car? And of course, my comment back to this person was, well, so you can slow them down or stop them when needed. And the vice president said, well, that's certainly one way to look at it, but there's another way to look at it. The real reason you put brakes on a race car is so that they can go faster, safely. And I really hadn't thought about it that way, but as I thought about that a little bit and looked at how that might apply to physical security, then it really is, I can look at putting brakes on the business as a physical security department, stopping the bad guys from getting in, or I can help the business go faster. And how can I do that? How can me as kind of the brakes in the organization help the organization to move faster? So that's what this slide really talks about a little bit. And maybe I'll just go over really quickly some of the things that you see there. So those productivity enhancements, a lot of that came from us being able to create a service to be able to provide to downstream systems when people were able to use their badge. So one of the big ones we implemented a few years ago was secure printing. In order to do secure printing before our service, you had to go to the printer, put in your user ID and password, and at Cisco you have to have strong passwords. So putting that password in on that little keyboard screen was very difficult. Took you often 35, 45 seconds to be able to do that. And we thought that there was a better way. So by putting badge readers on the printers and creating a service that we were able to then, when that badge was read through our access control Lenel application, we were able to send back the owner of that badge and allow them to log into the printer. It reduced the amount of time to log into that printer from 45 seconds down to 1 second. So working with our finance department, we were able to basically quantify, well, what would that be based on the number of people that log in on a yearly basis, and based on the savings of 30 seconds to 45 seconds, how much money would we really save? And that came up to over $1 million a year. So getting us the ability to be able to get the developer we needed to create that service, that was pretty much a no-brainer for the organization to come back and say, hey, with less than 12 months, I can give you back $1 million a year if you'll spend, I think it was about $150,000 to have a developer to develop the stuff that we needed. So now we're starting to talk about ways that me as a security practitioner can get value or can get revenue and funding to be able to do projects because I can really prove there's an ROI. Some of these other elements in there may apply to us as practitioners at large, strategic planning, stability, and utilization. Pretty much everybody who has the access control system has data in there that says who's come into the buildings, how often do they come into the buildings, when do they come into the buildings. And we've been able to use that at Cisco to help us really plan. How many buildings do we need? What buildings are utilized? What groups utilize those buildings as much? And do we really need the space that we've had now? So it really has gone a long way in the millions of dollars worth, although I don't have a specific number on that, to help our facilities people understand how many buildings do we really need, how many people use cubes, don't use cubes, use labs, use other areas within the buildings. So just allowing people to be able to consume that data that we have has been an extremely important area for us. So, this list really, again, shows you some examples of what we've been able to do, but I'm sure that there are a ton more of things that each security practitioner brings to the table, knowledge that they have, experiences they have, where they can go back to their business and say, here's where we think we can add value back to the business, just based on things that you already do or have within your security department right now. So I guess the reason for this slide really is to kind of set up the fact that there is a great market transition happening right now, and that's around the ideas of IoT, IoE, and digital transformation. And that is going to be a big area, in my opinion, where we as security practitioners can begin to add value back to the business and support the business in ways well beyond just simply keeping the bad guys out of the front door.
How interesting, Dion. You're saying actually the IoT will create essentially a lever that will motivate, if not force, the security industry to begin to think in terms of the overall business optimization, utilization, and so forth. And I noticed you also have partners in this. So you and the security department partnered with finance on what would become a conservative financial valuation of that productivity enhancement. When you got into building utilization, you involved commercial real estate. Very interesting. What would be your suggestion on how best to do that for the security leader today? What did you do that allowed you to change the culture of security to go outside its four walls and partner like that?
Yeah, I think one of the things, the keys to really doing that is really to better understand your business. What does your company do, rather than just saying, okay, what does the building look like? What's happening within in that building, and how can I help the people within that building to be more productive, to be able to move faster, to move quicker, and automate processes so that they, again, can get to the real value and business of what they're trying to do, rather than focusing on simply security processes and policies.
Yeah. Great. Let's go to the next slide.
Absolutely. And so I think this really, we've got this market transition that's happening, and we've got a choice as security practitioners. We can either just sit back and let the transition happen, and then we'll kind of pick and choose what products seem interesting to us as they kind of come up and develop, or we can take a more proactive stance and just kind of try to help drive this transition, both within our organization and be prepared for that, but also then help drive the industry at large. What do we need? What do manufacturers need? What does Alan's team need as they design products and services and platform to be able to work within the IoT and digital transformation era and world that will meet my needs, so that we're not doing a whole bunch of iterative approach. Let's have them start at the beginning with things that we feel are going to be important for us, because we've sat back and started to think about this thing and say, okay, if this transition really is happening, how do I prepare for it? And Ron, I think that goes back to your partnership here. You know, this is going to be way outside of our realm as physical security professionals. What do I know about big data or cloud computing or visualization or collaboration? These are elements probably outside of our domain. So we really do need to go back to this concept of partnering with IT, partnering with our integrators, and hopefully they're starting to hire people that have skills and knowledge in this, partnering with the consultants, as well as, I think, as industry trade associations, we need to start preparing for this transition and help allowing us to create education programs for this physical security professionals to better understand some of these terms. What does it mean? How are we going to be prepared for these types of things in the industry? Ron, why don't we pop over to the next slide? So with that, kind of Cisco's started to go through a transition and a mechanism to be able to better understand what does IoT mean, how are we going to digitalize ourselves as a group, as a company, what do we do with all these digital products that are going to come out and are coming out on the market. And so one of the first things that we talked about in that last slide is how do we gain a basic understanding of that. And again, self-education, education through associations is going to be important. Getting and relying on partners to help us understand these things. IT is going to be a huge partner for us to be able to get down this path as well. But the next step for us then was, how do we create this digital transformation? And maybe we'll just go ahead and build out the rest of those that slide, Ron, if you'd like, and then we'll talk a little bit about that. So creating this idea of what do we want it to do, this transformational vision of where we want to go with it is going to be critical for us. And then after that, coming up with, well, now that I've got this vision, what are the foundational elements or the critical imperatives to be able to create and meet that vision? And that hopefully then leads us to a foundational infrastructure that we can develop and put in place that we can build on to be able to start to implement that thing. So Ron, let's go to the next slide. So for us, one of the first steps again for our group was, can we sit down and start to do a brainstorm and create this common vision among STS and SSBR at large within Cisco that would allow us, for everybody to have somewhat of a shared vision of where do we want to go, what do we want to do, what do we think IoT means, and how will that affect us from a technology side, how would it affect us from an operations side, from a monitoring perspective. And so we began, and for us, it's been an ongoing process, but we kind of at least got to a framework of how we wanted to start to talk about things. And this particular slide indicates kind of a brainstorming mechanism that we utilized to come up with this common vision. And the brainstorming sessions were over almost a 4-month period that we started to do this. This is one of the early on slides, but I wanted to bring this up because it has a lot of data on it. Our end brainstorming session ended up with only about 5 or 6 bullet points on there that we could then dive deep into. But maybe I just wanted to go over a couple of the elements on this particular slide to talk about some of the things that we were concerned about or they thought about in our brainstorming session. And as other groups and companies go through their brainstorming session, I'm sure that you'll come up with a whole different list than perhaps what we had. But if we were, for example, we're going to dive down into the top right one, the security devices and systems. Some of the things we thought about was cybersecurity is huge. We see that more and more every day. People are getting into companies not only through phishing attacks and the normal ways, but they're also starting to look at the devices that are out there and how can they get in and start to do malicious things in a network based on IoT devices that are starting to be deployed. So how do we partner with IT and our InfoSec team to ensure that any devices that we deploy out there are going to be continuously monitored? How do we automate mitigation of problems when they happen? How do we make sure that all of our devices, before we install them or as we install them are compliant with IT requirements, such as 802.1x digital certificates or a migration to IPv6. Those are some of the elements that we looked around that. Locations of things on the left-hand side is one of the other big elements that we think has a lot of value and a lot of perspective in what we want to do in an IoT or digital world. So we kind of broke that down into the fact that we want to know the location of physical devices. We want to know the location of people. But we also want to know the location of logical things, which was a concept that we really hadn't thought of before. And so what do we mean by logical things? That might be as simple as, what's the location of a camera view? What is it really pointing at? How do we describe that, and how do people know about that? Can we use that information by other systems? But it also might mean things like we want to know the location of data and how data flows through the organization. And so that's going to be important for us for things to comply, like GDPR that's happening in Europe right now. How do we protect that data? How do we ensure that personal information stays within the geography that is assigned to be compliant with those types of regulations? So it really is taking that information now, and how do we create a framework around it so that that information not only complies with the policies and the regulations that are out there, but that we can represent it in a meaningful way so that it can be consumed by other internal systems and start to automate some of these things. So one of the big problems that we've always had with floor plans or maps is as soon as you create one, it's out of date. We've changed the location of the reader, they moved the door, they've done some sort of remodeling with it or in an organization. So keeping that up has always been problematic. But we're hoping in an IoT-based, digital-based world that some of these things can be automated. So could a device, for example, understand what type of a device it is, understand where it's located, and if it gets moved, can it identify itself that, hey, it has been moved? And perhaps then our floor plan automation system could automatically say, well, that camera has now been moved. It now should be relocated to another part of the floor plan and automatically update itself, or at least identify to a DBA that you need to go in and update this floor plan because the device has been moved. So those are just kind of a couple of examples of some of the things that we're looking at from a brainstorming perspective. And again, your brainstorming perspective is going to look substantially different than this one, but I think the important element is to let's just get a common vision of some of where we want to go toward the future.
This, Dion, this great conversation you're having internally, I look at these different subjects and I go, he's probably picking subject matter experts inside the company and as well as outside the company to produce these micro sessions, if you will, around each of these. Is that correct?
You're absolutely right. Yeah, I don't think that one person has enough information or knowledge or skills to be able to give us that vision. So we really do need it needs to be a team exercise. Absolutely.
Well, it strikes me because this is so, hate to use the term because it's negative, but since this is so disruptive to how we've organized our people within a process using our tools today, we have to reimagine maybe our professional silos. Do you see the day, for example, when a risk assessor who normally would have one view of the enterprise is teamed up with a technology domain expertise as well as a business strategist or business process optimization person? Do you see that teaming starting to occur?
Yeah, I think we're seeing that, absolutely. And I think even from a consulting, again, and an integrated point of view, they need to be part of this overall team to kind of help us do that strategy and to give us that, that vision and a perspective that we, particularly within our own organization, may not have.
Great. All right.
So for us, kind of the next step or milestone really was to then translate that vision into what are the basic building foundational blocks or the imperatives, as we're calling them. They're going to be critical for us to be able to implement and get to that vision. And so, again, our group came up with several different things, and this is, again, an early slide. We consolidated some of these things, but I wanted just to give them as an example. We're hoping that this thing becomes not only just an outline of the building blocks that we need to be able to get to the vision that we want to have, but they also then become a way for us to be able to judge platforms, products, and services to see how well they fit within these building blocks. And are they going to help get us there, or are they going to stop us? Are they going to hinder us and box us into a particular area to where we're not going to be able to get the full value of what we're trying to get with that particular platform or service. So that's really what this is all about. And then it's just a matter of us kind of layering in what those things might be. So again, just giving you an example of some Cisco products that we think may be able to be utilized in our building blocks to be able to get to kind of where we want to be. And again, this is just a small smattering of a few of the things. But again, the concept is let's utilize them. Let's create a dynamic set of building blocks and then determine how well are these things that we have either available to us today or that we're considering purchasing or implementing going to fit within that standard building block set, and just ensure that we're not heading down a road as we purchase or build something that's going to stop us or hinder us from getting to our overall vision.
What I love about this mind map and the preceding slide, Dan, is very seldom do I see the right kind of research done into not only where technology is going, a roadmap, if you will, but also how that aligns with, again, the people, process, and the tools. And what you're suggesting here is essentially a scorecard for evaluating external, internal vendors to build the future.
Yeah, I think that is really is the case. It also then can be utilized to kind of create a profile of your group or where you want to go, and you know what things fit within that profile as you're evaluating these things, and maybe you're judging them on several different product on several different of these building blocks, just not on a particular building block.
Excellent.
So I think that kind of leads us to one other area that I just want to focus on, because I know we're limited on time today, and that really is kind of building a framework for some of the common services. As we start to move to things like the cloud, et cetera, how do we then make sure that we have products and services that are able to help us across those things? So the concept is, if we go to a cloud-based environment, we've got pages that have sensor information on it. We've got access control or video systems that are hosted out in the cloud. All these things now become separate and disparate. They're no longer the traditional, I've got this big access control system and all these things spoke off of it. Now I've got all this stuff in the cloud. How do these cloud products know and interact together? So my thought is we need to build and need to drive the industry to build these layers that sit on top of these things that work across all of these elements. So if I've got an access control system in the cloud and a video management solution in the cloud, how do I create a workflow that works across all of those cloud-based solutions? How do I create policies that apply to all of those cloud-based solutions? Common data formats so that we can be able to manage data back and forth between those. Now, I don't think these things have been yet worked out in the industry, but an area that we really need to start to focus on and think about, so that we're not creating, again, different silos. We talk about breaking down silos, but as we move to the cloud, there is a big chance that we're going to come back to a siloed version and just have a lot more silos than what we had in the past.
Well, as a business process guy myself, Dion, what the promise here, again, that I very seldom see in the risk resilient security industry is if I'm modeling a workflow, then I can put the notion of key performance indicators within that workflow. It could be around velocity, quality of service. It could be a lot of different things. So now I've got the measurement technology background, if you will, to go back to that first slide of yours, to begin really adding value to the organization as a whole and proving that value over time.
Absolutely. Great point.
So let me ask both of you that. We've just gone through the traditional model with Alan. We've gone through how Dion is helping security think about its future model and roadmap. And if we take those lessons learned and we look at this picture again, how do we see it possibly changing? How will this look? Why don't you go first, Dion, and then we'll let Alan conclude.
You bet. So, again, great traditional model and has worked really well for us, but it's going to have to change. So it's got to be more than just simply adding more integrators and more things that you integrate into it. We need to start to look at these new architectures and environments that are going to happen, such as cloud environments, the fog environment, where the data is brought closer to the individual devices, and then how do we account for edge computing and communications and architectures? how are we going to start to look at things like blockchain or more broadly encrypted transaction technologies? How do they play into this thing? How is the ecosystem going to have to change to be able to account for all those new technologies?
Alan, last words on this. First of all, this is a fantastic injection of the future into your organization and also the category that you represent. But quite frankly, it's the end of access control as we know it and moving more toward a digital transformation model. What do you see, Alan, and where do you think it goes from here?
Sure. Well, first thing I want to say is that we're humbled and grateful to have customers such as Cisco that are as innovative as they are, that really push us to where we need to be. Dion's always been a very, very good partner of ours in terms of collaboration, and we've always known that they were moving faster than we were as a technology company in some areas. And so it's always been great to have them at the table with us, helping us drive some of the changes. From a product perspective for us, for the last several years, all of the new apps, if you will, and components of our product that we've been developing have been on a service-based, service-oriented architecture product. The idea of the separately maintained and deployed databases and separately maintained deployed components of a large enterprise system has to go away. So we recognized that several years ago and have taken the product to a services-oriented architecture. But beyond that, a couple of quick things that Dion said that I think are really important. The alignment of the different business segments within an organization could not be more critical to this endeavor. The customers of ours that have done advanced integration and tried to get to that 360-degree view, many of them have attempted it, many of them have failed within their own business to push this initiative forward. The ones that have been successful have been the ones that have aligned with each business unit, demonstrated the value that Dion talked about to the business in as many segments as they could. And before they ever touched a piece of software or a product, aligned on a business strategy to begin this process and begin to push this change through. So several of our customers have spent an entire year before they lifted a finger to the keyboard to align the business units, find out what the business's goals are as a business, and align those with what they plan to do with security. And I think that's really important because the process of doing that is not even possible without alignment of the business units. The next thing is that I think a lot of our security practitioners are traditional security practitioners. Some of them may have a law enforcement background. Some of them may have been in civil service, some of them military service. They technically are not capable of going into this realm. They don't possess those skills. They are responsible for securing borders and physical security. Now that model's changed. We've all seen that kind of move within some businesses, but there's a great deal of our large customers that still have that kind of person running the security side. And I think it's up to us as industry practitioners and industry leaders to empower those people that don't understand the idea of the 360-degree view. They certainly may not have a grasp. I'm fairly good at it, but I still have a lot to learn around the technology side of how we accomplish all this. But I think it's important for us to empower and begin to continue to educate, like we're doing today, about how do you go to your business, because you know the age-old story of the security guy going to the IT department and trying to get something done. Years ago, he couldn't even get an IP address for a security device. They weren't interested in security as a physical side of it. But I think it's important that we empower those people and those practitioners in those positions to be able to have the conversation with their business and be able to move this forward. And the last thing I want to say is, along with all of this, along with all of the technology and the alignment between the business units, is going to be a significant change in policy and procedure for our customers. So we know that there are significant policies and procedures in place today for the way we look at security. But as we make these changes, someone will need to keeping track of, creating, and then enforcing new business metrics for us to be measured by, because the old technology and the old way of doing things do not align with the newer policy and procedure requirements we're going to have as we get to this spot. I think there's a lot of conversation to be had just about the policy and procedure of things on their own. But I think overall we're trending in the right direction. More and more of our customers are approaching us and asking about, hey, how do I go to HR and risk and IT to accomplish these things you guys are talking about? So we're getting there, but conversations like these really, really help in educating the community.
Great words, Alan. We've tried to anticipate and channel your questions throughout, but here's a way to get your future questions answered. Contact us at info@the-great-conversation.com. And if you have a question for Dion or Alan, we'll get those questions to them and get you an answer back. Also, we've recorded this. So if you want to send your invite along to others who may be missed out and they want to view it later, this can be on our YouTube channel at the following address. You'll get it as one of the attendees. We'll send it out to you as soon as it's up on YouTube. It's usually 24, 48 hours. And then if you want to be a part of a live great conversation, please come to Seattle on the 5th and 6th. You'll be hearing Dion and other thought leaders in this industry talking about some of the biggest issues of the day. And you can go to the website and look at the agenda and see if it fits your needs. Usually it's seen as a next generation security leader program, so CSOs and their teams send it in. You get ASIS credits for it, and of course you'll create a fraternal, if you will, network that can help you in the future. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, Tim Purpura and Security System News for hosting us, and goodbye for now.